Good morning, everyone, and a very warm welcome to Outdoor Recreation NI's one-day conference, Outdoor Recreation, Achieving Northern Ireland's Potential. I'm Carolyn Ferris, Executive Director of ORNI, and it's my pleasure today to chair the event. It's great to see so many people online. We have just over 100 people registered for the conference, and I think that in itself says a lot just about the ongoing importance of outdoor recreation within the sector. We have a great range of speakers lined up for you today. So today's conference is broken into two sessions, much more of a strategic session this morning with implementation this afternoon. So this morning we have 3 presentations and 1 panel discussion. So we have asked our friends and colleagues from Scotland, England and the south of Ireland to join us this morning to share their insights into what's happening within their own countries. So we want you to engage with us as we go along today. And next slide, please. Thank you. And so to do that, you can submit questions at any time to the presenters during the seminar using the questions pane. And then we will get those answered as the morning goes along. Just a few small housekeeping rules then. Please, if you can, turn off your cameras and your microphones. It just helps us with bandwidth. If you want to use the chat panel, please do so, or raise your hand at any time. And if you're having trouble connecting to us today, just try logging out and coming back in again. So if you don't turn off your cameras yourselves, we also have the ability to do that. So don't worry when you just see yourself disappearing from the screen. So we're going to start this morning's conference. We had asked initially some of our ministers to come and speak, but because of PERDA, that's not possible. But we have representation this morning from DAERA. So Maya Taylor, who we're delighted to have represent DAERA, is going to start our conference this morning. So Maya, you're very welcome, and I'm going to pass straight over to you.
Thanks, Carolyn. I'd like to thank Outdoor Recreation for inviting the Minister, and yes, sadly we're in PERDA, but he really did wish to speak, and just to give a bit of an outline of kind of the value that is seen in such amazing delivery of outdoor recreation across Northern Ireland. To launch this People in the Outdoors Monitor for Northern Ireland, and to explore together the potential of the accessible the green space map, which hopefully will become a green and blue space map. As the weather begins to improve and the days become longer, we continue to see that increased numbers of people enjoying our accessible recreation spaces and routes across Northern Ireland, engaging in nature and improving our health and well-being, through that. And through the pandemic, it's been so very clear that our spaces and places have been such an important resource, which allowed people to interact with their surroundings and in new ways. And we all long hope that continues, and that passion for the outdoors continues. I have to say, I applaud the continued work of everyone in this meeting, and catching up online afterwards for your commitment and at times perseverance in your roles that that help to deliver this, developing and implementing strategies, policies, funding to enable and encourage everyone to spend the time outdoors in nature, designing, commissioning, creating new paths and open spaces that connect people with landscapes and local facilities, with each other, providing and managing these places and routes, identifying ways to facilitate and engage people in the environment and to understand how to do this in a sustainable and recognisable way. That all goes together to make what we have and what people are enjoying using and will continue. You'll have seen this year from Dara the development of the environment strategy, you know, really, and you'll see when the final one is agreed by the executive how much that outdoor recreation is recognised as playing a vital role in Northern Ireland, bringing benefits to society, you know, contributing to a wide range of areas including health and well-being, protecting the environment, tackling inequality, growing, greening the economy, increasing active travel and enhancing education and learning. And as part of that and the work that ORNI has been done on behalf of the Strategic Outdoor Recreation Group and really on behalf of all of us, the targets and commitments that are proposed there and as a draft programme for government indicator for the percentage of households within 400 metres of accessible natural space that's bigger than 2 hectares. And really all of this research in terms of the POMNI survey and the and the mapping work, you know, is to help us to plan strategically for the future so that we can identify the gaps where best we would put the resources that we have to help to continue to develop further what we have and to enable more people, whether they can't get to places now or whether the infrastructure needs to be improved, to be able to engage or to find new ways to engage. As well, coming down the line, we have more funding in terms of TRIPSI, the Tackling Rural Poverty and Isolation programmes. The Environment Fund closes tomorrow, just in case anybody needs to get their application in for 5 p.m. The Peace Plus and the potential that will bring in and many other funding programs, in fact, and other people in this room and Department for Infrastructure as well in terms of strategic greenways. So really just looking forward to how we continue to work together to expand and improve and connect people with the environment and each other. So I encourage us all to keep working together and look forward to the presentations and the discussion. Thank you.
Maya, thank you very much for your opening words. And, you know, I just want to pay tribute. In every organisation, there is always a champion. And you are our champion within DAERA, and we do really appreciate that. And it would also be remiss of me not to say we have another champion in another department, and that is Mike McClure from Sport NI. So between Mike and Maya in DAERA and Sport NI, really, you know, we always need champions within government to try and help us raise the agenda of outdoor recreation. And those are our 2 champions. And honestly, if it wasn't for both yourselves driving the agenda within government, we wouldn't be anywhere near where we are today. So I just want to take this opportunity when you're on screen. I'm not sure if Mike's with us today, just to thank you both personally, but also to thank the departments for helping us achieve where we've got not just ourselves as an organisation, but the whole of outdoor recreation in Northern Ireland, because certainly over the last 10, 15 years, I mean, we've seen some phenomenal success. And so it's an exciting time to be involved. And no better person to know that than our own chairman, Dawson Stelfox. So I'm going to hand over to Dawson now. Dawson's going to set today's conference in context and tell us all a wee bit more just about who's coming up in this morning's session. So Dawson, over to you. Dawson, you're on mute. Perfect.
Started with the most basic of mistakes. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, and thanks to Carolyn and to Maya for giving those introductions. As chair of ORNI, I want to thank all of you for attending today to share best practice and to hear about a number of exciting initiatives which contribute to achieving the potential of outdoor recreation, the central theme of this conference. ORNI was established over 25 years ago now to open up the Northern Ireland countryside for outdoor recreation. And from the start, there were three strands to our work: research, development of strategy, and physical implementation on the ground. And those three strands are just as relevant today, and we're going to be hearing about all three, starting this morning with research and strategy, and then looking at completed projects after lunch. Outdoor recreation has never been higher up the agenda, both politically and, importantly, in the mind of the general public, and there's good reasons for that. There's a recognition that it's no longer just a nice thing to do, but that it brings many benefits: improving health and well-being, protecting the environment, tackling inequality, growing and greening the economy, increasing active travel, and enhancing education and learning. But like many of us who have been going to the countryside for years, we have seen significant changes in numbers and demographics over the last 2 years of pandemic-influenced behaviour. At first, we could perhaps think that once other, maybe indoor and more contained attractions reopened, then things would go back to a pre-pandemic normal. But there is now the evidence emerging that there has been a fundamental shift, and that shift overall is good for society, with those positive outcomes for people that I've just listed. Of course, it's all too easy for someone with my background in the outdoors to cast a cynical or even an elitist eye over the newcomers. Over the last 2 years, I've started to engage with many of them. I've shared the summits of Binion's ice-shrouded tours with youngsters in gutties while I was contemplating putting on crampons. I've watched with bemusement pampered pooches being carried in marsupial-like pouches over the hills. I met a group of young men with very heavy rucksacks and very sore feet along the Mourne Wall looking for a place to camp, who seemed bemused by the idea that somewhere lower, more sheltered and beside a stream might make more sense. I shook my head at teenagers carrying 20-kilogram bags of firewood straight up from a garage forecourt over the hills to have a campfire at Loch Shanna. And I couldn't quite bring myself to condemn a troop of young girls carrying pink helium-filled balloons up Donard, releasing them in the memory of a school friend who died tragically young. All too easy to laugh, to despair, to condemn, but almost without exception, all those people and countless others were finding great joy, solace, satisfaction and fulfillment through their adventure. It was hard, unknown, challenging and rewarding. They would not have classified the outcomes in the bureaucratic jargon that I used earlier, but all of them instinctively knew it was doing them good. So these outcomes, health, economic, environmental, contribute to many government priorities. And as we move more intentionally towards tackling the nature and climate emergencies, the importance of connecting people, as many people as possible, with their natural world will never be so important. That obviously brings challenges with it. Resources for visitor management and protection environment need to match the scale of the use if it is to be sustainable. All of you here today know that we have to manage and direct how we all use the countryside. But we must find clever ways of doing that to keep the adventure alive, the freedom, the self-reliance, the personal responsibility that is at the heart of being in the outdoors. That challenge sets up the balance, I think, the tension in which we all have to work. We have to create the opportunities while protecting and restoring nature, giving economic benefits to host communities without spoiling the essence of the special environments, keeping adventure alive while offering education, guidance, training, learning. It is vitally important that we all work collectively and collaboratively to maximise the opportunities presented to us to achieve Northern Ireland's potential. and that must be research-led. For many in the outdoor recreation sector, including ORNI, progress has been driven by secondary research or trying to contextualise research from other nations, combined by commitment and passion, which add the local knowledge and intelligence. This commitment and passion has not dwindled, but the rather snappily titled People in the Outdoor Monitor for Northern Ireland can now provide us all with the robust evidence base to make data-led decisions and to make a compelling argument for change. And I'm really looking forward to hear Duncan and Aideen in a few moments share their findings with us. We have also the development by ORNI, supported by Geolytical, of the green space layer for Northern Ireland, which will provide an authoritative map of all publicly accessible green space and off-road trails in Northern Ireland. It will be designed to set the target of 90% of the population within a 5-minute walk of quality green or blue space, proposed for in the programme for government, and other strategies can be objectively measured. It can be used by government departments and agencies, councils, EGNOs, for infrastructure planning, in keeping, in my opinion, intrusive wind farms and other development out of protected and high-value recreation areas, gap analysis, resource allocation, site suitability assessments and demographic analysis. The data will be visually engaging with consumer platforms such as Outmore, northernireland.com, and I look forward to hearing more on this from John Hewitt of Geolytical later on this morning. To supplement that research, we also need to learn from best practice. Northern Ireland continues to have much to learn from our neighbours, and it's great to have contributions from England, Scotland and Ireland within this morning's session. Kevin Lafferty, Pippa Langford and Daithí de Forge have been great friends to ORNI over the years, so I look forward to hearing their thoughts both from a strategic and a practical sense. In particular, Daithí de Forge is chair of Carmen Natua, the working group which is currently preparing the outdoor recreation strategy for Ireland. ORNI is relishing its role as facilitator in the development of this strategy. There are many learnings from Northern Ireland. Unsurprisingly, of course, many of the themes and challenges are the same. And of course, there are many cross-border opportunities. ORNI wants to share and develop the best practice we encounter across the whole island, and we think we are in a unique position to be able to do that. This morning, we focus on research and development of strategy, but this is pointless without implementation. So this afternoon, we look forward to some great examples of best practice from across Northern Ireland, and Carolyn will introduce those after lunch. I know you agree this is an exciting time for the development of outdoor recreation in Northern Ireland and Ireland as a whole, and I hope the learnings from today can inspire further collaborative action to allow us to achieve our full potential. Thank you again for attending today. I'm really looking forward to hearing from the speakers, and I'm sure we'll learn a lot from the collaboration which will follow. Thank you.
Dawson, thank you very much. Thanks for setting the scene, and thank you just for sharing your own personal thoughts on where we are to do with outdoor recreation. So thank you very much for that. We're just going to go straight into our first presentation, which Dawson has already mentioned. In the past in Northern Ireland, we weren't very good at having our own research. But now, thanks to funding from DAERA, we have now been undertaking substantial research during the past 2 years. So I'm going to hand over to Duncan and to Aideen to give the first presentation on the People in the Outdoors Monitor in Northern Ireland.
The presentation today will focus on insights and finding from new research, People in the Outdoors Monitor for Northern Ireland, referred to as POMNI for short. I'll give you a short background to the research before handing over to Duncan, a 56-degree insight, who will share the findings. Most of us here today are very aware of the huge benefits of outdoor recreation. However, although these benefits are widely evidenced in general, a lack of specific information for Northern Ireland has made it difficult to provide an accurate picture of the value it brings. And this has made it quite challenging on a number of fronts. So it's made it challenging to demonstrate the contribution of outdoor recreation to the delivery of government department outcomes, put the case forward to increase support for outdoor recreation, measure progress and understand the impact of our investment and our our policies and plans, and to make confident decisions on policy and investment regarding outdoor recreation. The lack of specific information on outdoor recreation was acknowledged by the Strategic Outdoor Recreation Group, known as SORG for short. Many of you may be familiar with SORG. You can see the list of organisations on screen there. Essentially, it is a cross-government group with numerous departments, agencies and organisations with an interest in outdoor recreation coming together. SORG very much wanted to address the issue, and it was agreed to support the commissioning of primary research. DERA funded this in 2020 and 2021. They funded ORNI to lead the project, and ORNI commissioned 56 Degree Insight to carry out the research. And this work and all of these efforts of SORG and DERA have really led to the creation of POMNI and the report we have here for you today. You may remember last year we launched 2021 POMNI report. It's very significant as this was the first time we'd ever captured any data for participation in outdoor recreation in Northern Ireland. We've moved on a bit now and completed that research in 2022. So we now have a more robust and complete data set for Northern Ireland with over 6,000 respondents taking part of the research. So this provides us with a huge bank of information and insights like we've never had before in our sector. The research will be carried out every 3 years to enable us to track the changes in behaviour and participation in outdoor recreation. But back to today and focusing on on our results today. And with that in mind, I'd now like to hand over to Duncan Stewart to share the findings of POMNI 2022. Thank you.
Hello, my name's Duncan Stewart, and over the next 10 minutes or so I'm going to be presenting the results from a new survey called People in the Outdoors Monitor for Northern Ireland, or POMNI as it's shortened to. I'm from 56 Degree Insight, the company who undertook this survey on behalf of a number of survey partners as listed in the slide at the top there. So the survey approach, just as a bit of background, the survey was undertaken on an online approach. We had 6 waves of fieldwork over the period from November 2020 to October 2021, with fieldwork undertaken on the omnibus survey, which is conducted by survey fieldwork company Cognizant, so we did it in partnership with them. Now, every wave of the surveying involved about 1,000 interviews, so a robust sample in itself during each wave, and the survey sample was representative of the population with quotas set to ensure that we got the right mix of demographics by gender, age, socioeconomic status, region of residence, etc. So overall sample of over 6,000 interviews, which provides a really robust database, plus or minus 1% at the overall levels, and an ability to break down the results, for example, by particular demographics, particular geographic areas, as I'll show in the next few slides. Now, POMNI has been designed to measure the benefits of outdoor recreation in relation to programme for government themes, as shown in the slide here. And over the next few slides, I'll be focusing on a number of these areas to show you the sorts of results which we've found around these, some of the sort of the kind of key headline findings that have come from the survey. So, starting with the POMNI results for physical activity. Okay, so first of all, we asked people about their reasons for taking visits to the outdoors when they did spend time outside, and what we found was that in just over 3 in 5 occasions, exercise or health and fitness was a motivation, as shown, quite 54% to get some exercise, 35% specifically saying I visited the outdoors for health and fitness reasons. We actually asked people about the nature of the activities undertaken, how often they'd been undertaking them, and the level of sort of vigour they'd been undertaking their activities for. And from this, we were able to, by knowing how many visits people were spending, how much time was spent outdoors over a period of time, we were able to estimate that around about 1/3 of the Northern Ireland adult population meet the Chief Medical Officer's physical activity guidelines for adults during outdoor recreation visits. And that proportion is a third across the whole population, 33%, but it does vary between different demographic groups. So this chart shows some of that ability of the ORNI survey to break things down by different demographics. So we can see, for example, it's somewhat higher amongst the more affluent socioeconomic groups, the ABC ones, than the DEs. It's higher amongst the least deprived areas. People live in the least deprived areas and the most deprived areas. It's higher in urban areas than rural areas, and it's also higher amongst men than women. So we can see some differences there, some possible inequalities related to that. Now, moving on to health and well-being, another of the key areas of interest. Now, again, we ask people about their reasons for taking visits, and so you can see that, relatively high proportions, over a third of visits, stated that they took their visits to the outdoors to relax and unwind, but also a number of other reasons for taking visits related to well-being, to find peace and quiet, to feel revitalized, or to spend time with family, friends, or other people, given as reasons for taking part in outdoor visits. And when we ask people about the outcomes they gain from visits, that was also really revealing. And so we can see, two statements. We asked people whether or not they agree with these, and we found that over half of people agreed that the visits that they'd taken either made them feel calm and relaxed or made them feel refreshed and revitalized. In fact, when you look at these two statements together, 77%, over 3/4 of visit takers agreed with one or other of these statements. But again, there are some variations across demographics. So it's interesting with this particular measure that the variations aren't significant. So this suggests that the well-being benefits are fairly consistent across different socioeconomic groups, across urban and rural residents, across men and women. Moving on to the next area, sort of the environmental side of things. So what we saw here was that overall, when we asked about the motivations, about 2 in 5 visits taken were related to nature as a benefit, so either to spend time in nature or to enjoy scenery or wildlife. And also we asked about the benefits of visits taken. So you can see here that overall 28% of people who have taken visits to the outdoors reported that they felt closer to nature because of this experience. But interestingly, that was quite a lot higher in certain settings. So for example, 41% of people who visited a woodland felt closer to nature, 41% if it was a mountain, hill or moorland as well. Also higher proportions for river or lake or country park visits as well. And this is all really important. The chart at the bottom of this slide is results from the Continuous Household Survey from 2017-18. And what that showed us was that the more frequently that someone takes visits to the outdoors, the higher their level of concern for the natural environment. So there are some proven links that we can see about people spending time outdoors, connecting with nature and becoming maybe more aware of environmental concerns and more caring for the environment. And the next area, economics. So obviously an important element of the value of outdoor recreation could potentially be the economic spend. So on average, we asked people how much money they spent, if any, on their visit, their most recent visit to the outdoors. The average across all visits was £7. But we can do some calculations here. We can apply that to our estimate of the total numbers of visits taken by the whole population, over a whole year. And we get to some large figures, as you can see on the left there, in terms of total spend during visits. Now, what was that spend on? We also asked questions on that. So you can see about a third of spend typically was to buy fuel for a vehicle when a car was used for the journey. Almost a third on food and drink, and then a breakdown, smaller proportions on admission fees, maps and guidebooks, transport fares, car parking, etc. So you can see the distribution of spend there. Now, an important area that the survey covers is we're trying to understand to what extent there may be barriers in the way or factors which stop people from spending as much time outdoors as they would like to. So an interesting area that we've covered is we ask people to rate their local green spaces a number of different dimensions. So you can see in the chart here, the green bars are the people who are agreeing with different statements. That the majority of people do agree that the local green spaces are within easy walking distance or are a high enough standard to want to visit, that their facilities meet their needs and that they feel safe when visiting local green spaces. In general, about 2/3 to 3/4 agreeing with these statements. However, we did find, though, that again, there were lower ratings, there were variations within the population for these particular measures, lower ratings amongst women, unemployed people, people with a disability and residents of rural areas. And we also asked people more broadly, what were the reasons for not visiting the outdoors more often? Not surprisingly, given the fieldwork period, COVID-19 rules or concerns were top of the list. But bad weather also features, often is the case in these sorts of surveys, unfortunately. But interestingly, worries about safety, almost a quarter saying that they were worried about safety. 21%, almost 1 in 5, around 1 in 5 concerned about where they could go. So some suggestions around sort of access issues there. Okay, in terms of the sort of final set of results I'll show you in this sort of quick presentation today, we of course were interested in the extent to which the pandemic had influenced or impacted upon people's time spent outdoors. So in each of our 4 waves of surveying, we asked the respondents whether or not they were spending more time or less time outdoors than they had been doing before the pandemic, or whether there was no change in participation. And what we've found is, a real polarized picture. Early in the pandemic, we had, the dark blue bars on the left, higher proportions of people saying they decreased time outdoors, but we also had proportion of people saying they'd increased time. But there's a real diversity in terms of the groups who gave those different responses. But increasingly, as we've moved into more recent periods, you can see that no change in participation bars have become larger as people have returned more to their normal visit-taking frequencies and behaviours. The demographic differences are really significant in this one though. So people most likely to have increased time outdoors during this overall period are the younger and people who work full or part-time. People with no change more likely to be the oldest age group, retired and men. People most likely to say that they've decreased time outdoors, more likely to be women, unemployed people, and people with long-term illness or disability. Possibly, certainly in that latter case, it may be the case that these are people most likely to have been shielding or concerned about spending time outdoors during parts of the pandemic. Now, what we can see, and we've looked further afield, there's some sort of interesting connections with the data collected in England and Scotland by other organisations. So, for example, we see Natural England's latest study found that overall there was a sort of 41% of people stated they'd increased time outdoors over the pandemic period, so slightly higher than we're seeing in our survey. However, in Scotland, what we did see is a real mixed picture. One of the key findings was that there was a degree of pent-up demand with people spending more time outdoors post-pandemic, but this was more so amongst people who work from home more often, so an interesting connection there. And we can see in our results, people who work full or part-time are more likely to spend time outdoors. It could well be a connection with people having more flexibility in order to do a walk or a run during their lunchtime from home when they're working from home. And as people move more to hybrid working, it may be that becomes sort of a longer term trend as we see more people spending at least part of the time working from home compared to pre-pandemic. So that's been a bit of a whistle-stop tour through some of the key results, and it's very important to say we're just really scraping the surface there, and it's really important to say also that there's a full report available on the ORNI website, or available shortly, as well as some other sort of special analysis that we've undertaken or will be undertaking, looking at areas such as comparing urban and rural residents, looking at the results in relation to socioeconomic status, deprivation, and so on. So the number of different ways that we can look at the results because of the big sample size, which should be very useful. Also at a geographical level, we'll soon be able to provide results at the more local authority level. So I think the key message here is to please use POMNI, be aware of POMNI, look at the results now, and if you can't see the findings cut in the way that you would like to, get in touch, because there's a lot of potential to use the results further, and just as it says there, make the most of POMNI. Thank you very much.
There was a lot of information shared by Duncan in that presentation, so I'd like to take a moment to focus on the key takeaways or insight from his presentation. Each of these are listed in graphic form, and you can see an example on screen. And ORNI will be sharing these graphics on Twitter and other social media platforms today and in the days and weeks to come. So very much would ask each of you to share far and wide. So in terms of participation, 7 in 10 adults visit the outdoors for leisure each week, and that represents 144 million visits. Most common activities are short walks, dog walking, spending time with children and running. However, access to green space is not equal across the population, with rural areas suffering the most. People who live within a shorter walk of green space, so closer to green space in their area where they live, visit the outdoors more. People recognise the benefits of outdoor recreation in terms of mental and physical health, as well as connecting with nature. And lastly, outdoor recreation makes a significant economic contribution each year to the Northern Ireland economy. So that's the last of the graphics. So there's 6 key takeaways or graphics. So as I said, please share on your social media platforms after the conference today. The most important aspect is, of course, what we do with the data from today onwards. So we would strongly encourage you to use the research insights in your funding applications, in your decision making, when you're developing plans and strategies within your organisation. This is key information to help guide you. ORNI too will be using the POMNI data. So we're delighted to hear that an update of the Outdoor Recreation Action Plan is included within the draft environment strategy developed by DERA. So this is fantastic news, and the POMNI data will be absolutely central to this process and will inform any changes in those plans. And just let you know, in addition, that ORNI currently have a facilitation role in the development of the National Outdoor Recreation Strategy for Ireland. That's on behalf of the Department of Rural and Community Development in Corlin na Tuatha in the south. And this too will help guide the content of the Outdoor Recreation Action Plan. But essentially, we are here to support you with this information and to help you use it. We'll be putting all of the data reports on the ORNI website, and I know the link is being put into the chat now by Kerry. We will also be doing further communication to a range of stakeholders and audiences and policymakers. But 2022 will be very much about further analysis as well, of using the data that we already have. As we've got such robust data, we do have the ability to do in-depth analysis looking at geographic splits. So we plan to look at each council areas and the particular participation levels there, rural versus urban, areas of deprivation, disability, and so on. But please ask for help or support if you need. We're here and very keen for people to use the data. Thank you for your time today. I'm going to leave you with this slide, which calls out the ORNI vision, which is a more active and healthy society appreciating the outdoors. And furnished with this new information and evidence that we shared with you today, really what this is a call for all of us to harness the energy and momentum to really realise this vision of a more active and healthy society in Northern Ireland. Thank you.
Aileen and Duncan, thank you so much. So much great information there, hot off the press. And as Maya says, the closing day is today for the Challenge Fund. So if you want really good, up-to-date information, you can get it now, because Kerry's just put up, I can see in the chat panel, a link to the POMNI research.
Carolyn, just to say, tomorrow at 5.
Tomorrow at 5. Thanks, Maya. Tomorrow at 5. So one day to go. So there's the information that you might need to help justify your funding application. So thanks Aileen and Duncan, and also Aileen is online today, so if you do have any questions right now about the research, you can put the question up on the chat panel. Just to say, I should have said earlier, if you are into tweeting, the hashtag for today's conference is #OutdoorRecPotential, and we will use that later on for our lunchtime challenge as well. So that's #OutdoorRecPotential. Okay, so Aideen mentioned there at the end of her presentation that we are helping Cornlatua in the south of Ireland, facilitating them with the preparation of the new outdoor recreation strategy. So we're delighted that Docky DeForge is with us this morning. Docky is the chair of the subgroup who is responsible for putting together the new National Outdoor Recreation Strategy. So Docky, you're very welcome, and I'm just going to hand straight over to you for your presentation.
Thank you very much, Carolyn, and good morning, everybody. I'm delighted to be here to have the opportunity to present to you today. Without further ado, I will share my screen. Okay, so I'll just check, Kerry, if that screen share looks okay. Great, thank you very much. Thanks all. I'm coming to talk to you today on behalf of Cornlatua, which is the Irish Countryside Recreation Council. A name change is imminent to make it more descriptive, I suppose, and understandable to everybody. And I'm chairing the group which are developing the National Outdoor Recreation Strategy currently. In my day job, I work as the head of recreation for Coillte, the state forestry body, who are a commercial semi-state company here in the south, charged with timber production, but also very importantly, the leading provider of outdoor recreation in Ireland and the largest state landowner. So to talk to you today, I want to give you some insights into the National Outdoor Recreation Strategy, how it's come about, how we're developing the strategy, and to give you some insight now at this stage into some of the early outputs from the draft strategy. Where are we along the timeline? I'll take you through that, show you some of the key outputs, and take you through some of the next steps as well. So the National Outdoor Recreation Strategy is primarily a stakeholder-led strategy, and this is quite different to other government strategies that have been developed in the past. By stakeholder-led strategy, and I'll come into a little more detail on this, it really is bringing together all of the key outdoor recreation providers, supporting facilitators, service providers, enablers, right across the whole of Ireland, and that's been hugely important to give us the insights effectively from the ground up as to where we need to go with the strategy over the next 5 years. So the development and indeed the oversight, the post-development oversight of the strategy is stakeholder-led. But very importantly as well, it is delivered across government departments, and we are currently at a stage of bilaterals with various government departments and key agencies who have a responsibility to pick up on the actions, influence and shape the actions which go into the strategy, and indeed deliver on them. And of course, one of the key things that you already know from outdoor recreation is that it brings benefits to all areas of Irish society. So the cross-departmental function is really important. As we are going through our bilaterals with the various government departments, it's becoming more and more apparent how important outdoor recreation is for delivering on multiple benefits, and how just the sheer reach that it has into various government departments and their own objectives and deliverables. And of course, we know that all of the downstream and output benefits to the public, which are so very many and across so very many different sectors. And a comment, I suppose, that the previous strategy, it really suffered due to the lack of leadership and to the lack of cross-departmental collaboration and support to see it delivered. One of the things we've been absolutely adamant about in the development of this strategy is that it has to be measurable. It has to have SMART objectives. As we know in business terminology, they have to be specific, measurable, attainable, realistic and time-bound. And that's really important, that we can measure where we are in terms of the delivery of the strategy and measure our progress right along the way. So the two key bodies then leading on the development of the national strategy have been Comhairle na Tuatha, which I've previously mentioned. Comhairle was established in February in 2004. It's a non-statutory body. It's a forum which brings together representatives across all of the public and private landowners across the country, recreational user groups, the governing bodies, and indeed all state bodies with a responsibility or an interest in the countryside. And of course, countryside now extends and becomes a term, I suppose, which we're moving away from, as have the visitor safety group as well, because the important reference here is outdoors, and outdoors isn't necessarily rural, outside urban areas, but a key part of urban provision and peri-urban provision as well. And the Department of Rural and Community Development. This department is the key department in terms of supporting the strategy. It's also the key department. It's where outdoor recreation lives, really, in government here, and provides considerable funding through funding schemes to upgrade and new provision of outdoor recreation. And it acts as the secretariat to Comhairle na Tuatha. So Comhairle na Tuatha sits under the auspices of the Department of Rural and Community Development. So these are really the two key bodies leading the development, and indeed its oversight in time to come. Busy slide here in terms of how we're structured. So I was asked by Comhairle na Tuatha to lead on the development of the strategy, and it's vice chaired by Helen Lawless in Mountaineering Ireland, with the support then of Sport Ireland, who are also a co-leadership body in delivering and developing and delivering the strategy, and of course the Department of Rural and Community as well. So as a steering group, we then formed a working group across Comhairle, and just important, I think, to see the range of who's actually involved in this, the kind of stakeholders that have come together to deliver the strategy, from the local authorities through to private landowner reps, key department in the Department of Transport, Tourism and Sport, and very many others as well, in terms of community representative groups through the local development network. And then also, very importantly as well, in bringing on board Outdoor Recreation Northern Ireland in the supporting function to deliver and develop the strategy, Aideen Martin's work in ORNI has been absolutely key in terms of, if you like, keeping us all on the straight and narrow. And indeed, as we formed a working group, we also formed subgroups, because as emerging strategic objectives came along through the work of the working group, the subgroups then were formed to work through those. And Aideen and the wider ORNI body have been hugely helpful in terms of the support and assistance to pull all of this together. It is a significant piece of work. So the process that we have gone through has been quite extended over time. We started in February of last year, and we started, first of all, to really set down some of the high-level ambition for the National Outdoor Recreation Strategy. We developed a mission statement, an overall vision, and values then which underpin the strategy. When we drafted then those values and the vision, we went out to an early stage of consultation with the public, and we did that in 3 different ways. We did it through strategic workshops, where we had the interdepartmental group, the cross-government departmental body, and Comhairle itself. We had regional workshops with county-based and locally based stakeholder groups, and then an online questionnaire with the general public. Shortly, we will move into a phase 2 consultation, and we'll use that same structure to consult widely on the draft strategy. So when we finished our first stage consultation, we started to develop strategic objectives. There was emerging themes starting to come through, and we developed draft objectives and an action plan and very clear, concise actions associated to deliver each of those objectives. And these are what we took then into bilateral meetings with each government department and the state agencies. And this has been hugely helpful, because really when it gets down to assigning responsibility for delivery against a certain government department, they need to see and we need to understand fully what that actually means. So we've got to the point where we have those draft actions forwarded in advance to government departments, and we pick those up in bilateral meetings, which have been really, really helpful. In some government departments, maybe less involved in necessarily in delivering on the objectives for outdoor recreation, one bilateral has sufficed. But in some cases where we really have very significant overlap, there have been a number of these. We'll move shortly into our phase 2 consultation, and then with the draft strategy, and then we'll finalise our strategy resulting on the output from that stage of consultation, and then move into a stage where it's issued as a memo to government and signed off by the Cabinet ahead of publication of the strategy in August of this year. So the departmental involvement has been key, along with the lead from DRCD. There's a number of other key departments involved as well. The interdepartmental meetings have been very important as well, because it brings the key players, the key sections of each government department together, so they can understand the crossover and where they sit in to delivery piece of the strategy. It will move to a stage of Cabinet approval, and then the action plan then follows this. So that then commits each department to individual actions to deliver the strategy. And then the Department of Rural and Community Development, as the lead department, will coordinate and review that action plan on a quarterly basis. That's post publication of the strategy, right through the 5-year period of the strategy. Just to touch on the stakeholder-led approach, because I think there's some interesting insights in this as well, is that in this way, it really has been a truly collaborative and stakeholder-led approach. It has to do something like this, because you're engaging so widely, and it's coming from very, very many different, I suppose, opinions and positions around, landowner, outdoor recreation provision, governing bodies of sport, etc. It's been very resource intensive and very time consuming, but indeed truly collaborative. And I think you'll see that as you see the draft strategy emerging. So the timeline has run since February of last year, with the view to launch in August of this year. The dividends, though, are clear to be seen, because we're engaging at such an early stage and so intensively with the key players and government departments. All of the stakeholders are fully bought into the strategy outcomes. How many times have we seen strategies in the past where delivery agencies have been noted against particular actions within a strategy, but they've never been involved in development of that strategy? And really, if you don't have that buy-in from an early stage, you can't expect the kind of outcome that you really want to see. So the stakeholders have already engaged in how and when they will deliver the actions. And now the process is across government departments and agencies agreeing the resources that they will bring to deliver the strategy. There is genuinely a stakeholder excitement and an energy about the delivery of the strategy, and that comes through really strongly in our current discussions. So in terms of the strategy development, we're working through a series of creating a vision for the strategy, and I'll take you down through some of these stages in a little more detail. Vision for the overall ambition of what the strategy should deliver, its mission, the key pillars which support the strategy, and those key themes or pillars then were developed into strategic objectives. Each of those objectives then has an action tagged to it, which helps us get to deliver that objective, and that action plan and timeline is a very detailed spreadsheet, if you like, of the individual actions, all individually numbered with the timeline and tagged against a particular government department or agency to deliver, so that we can measure that as we go. So you can see the structure that we've gone through to deliver that. So just to give you an idea then of what we're talking about, our vision statement for the strategy is this: Ireland's outdoors, a world of activities for all. A short sentence that took quite some time for us to nail down, but I think what it should do is give you an idea of the level of ambition that we have for the national strategy. A key part, I suppose, of this being the for all piece. We have been particularly keen to emphasise the greater participation and inclusion that the national strategy has to deliver. Then the mission then for the strategy is that it will lead, guide and facilitate sustainable development and management of outdoor recreation and increase participation in order to realise those very significant social, health and economic benefits that we know accrue from outdoor recreation. We'll do this while respecting the custodians of the land, caring for the environment and promoting responsible recreation. The strategy is underpinned by a key set of values, and this is a piece that I want to emphasise because it was really important that everybody bought into these values from the start, and they very much do underpin the strategic objectives that we have developed. Just to touch on some of these values around leadership is that it has to be owned. The strategy has to be owned by somebody, and previous strategies have failed in this regard, where they were seen as, if you like, owned by the collective, which didn't work. So owning and shaping a better future for outdoor recreation is what we've tagged to leadership. Under a collaboration, working together for the common good, while listening and respecting all stakeholders. That's really important. We can't do this by leaving stakeholder groups behind or by creating priorities one above the other that puts a stakeholder body's priorities further down. In terms of inclusion, prioritising equality of opportunity for all, and actively promoting inclusion and diversity throughout the strategy. Under respect, respecting the rights and responsibilities of the custodians of the land and recreational users, and caring for the natural environment. And finally, under quality, striving for excellence in developments and experiences. And this really speaks, I suppose, to the ambition of what we want from the output here, is that we have very significant and ambitious experiences for the public under the strategy. We did also then define what do we mean by outdoor recreation, and again, while this seems a straightforward statement, there's a lot to unpack in it, and took quite some time to nail down. But we're talking about physical activities that take place in the natural environment. We did move to define what those activities are, and you can see a sheet here of what they are. I think an important one here, which through the development of the strategy and the definition was incorporated into it. Two key elements here actually. One is that under the definition we have included the passive enjoyment of the natural environment, While a lot of us and a lot of the stakeholder groups are particularly involved in managing the activities around that you see here in terms of outdoor recreation, the passive enjoyment of the natural environment is in fact a significant piece and quite a motivator for a lot of people to use the outdoors for recreation. So really important that we recognise that. And we also have added in there natural play. Play in the natural environment is such a key part of how younger age groups interact with the outdoors, and has to be included here importantly as a very natural piece of their involvement in the natural environment. So as we went through developing the strategy, we started at an early stage working closely with ORNI to develop some case studies to look at how things have been developed elsewhere. And we developed three clear case studies in different countries. And there are a few key environment and trends that we wanted to take on board as we were developing this strategy in a period of a pandemic, and what kind of implications indeed that had. We could see very significant upswing in terms of access to the outdoors as the COVID restrictions started to lift. Very, very importantly was just that access to outdoor space, to outdoor green space for recreation, just simply to get outside. Some of the macro trends that came through around generally a positive economic outlook, very much a changing climate as well, extreme weather events having significant impact on the infrastructure that we develop and manage and maintain. Emerging importance on sustainability in a time of aging population, but that multi-generational leisure is very clear, very clearly demonstrated now as well. While lives have become busier, they've also become more flexible. So the old traditional sort of peak time, off-peak time for outdoor recreation really no longer exists, or certainly has broken down quite a bit. Very much a connected world, connected through social media, but perhaps less connected to nature than ever was before, with very much a consumer that's more demanding and rather expects more from the facilities and services which support their outdoor recreation experience. From an outdoor recreation team, certainly an awful lot more people enjoying the outdoors. Putting my quilcha hat on, I mean, we've seen the numbers literally double on release from COVID restrictions, with only very much a minor fall away in recent months. So we are now at a much higher sustained level of outdoor recreational use than we were before. Very much a less traditional profile than before, with an emphasis on soft activities, and walking is key. Interest though across a range of activities as well, and emerging, the greater emphasis on outdoor swimming, outdoor and wild swimming, the use of e-bikes as we develop over time, and more informal recreation that's not organised into groups or clubs or structures. And of course, around technology, the level of information which is available now, especially through imagery, how Instagram and social media images tend to drive new destinations for outdoor recreation. How can we respond to that? And social media growth continues, and understanding that the messaging that we need to give to the public around outdoor recreation is clearly going to be delivered through social media. So then to come back, I suppose, to our consultation stage then, while they were some of the emerging trends, the process of consultation with the public, as I had outlined previously, was a really, really interesting one, and certainly very, very key themes coming through, key areas against those themes coming through from consultation. Around investment, the coordination of investment across government departments. There are very many in the way that government does. There is investment in particular objectives and capital funding streams that are aimed at different things. Very significant investment here around active travel. But having to recognise that active travel, of course, has very much an influence on how people use the outdoors for recreation as well. So that key piece of coordination of investment across departments is important for us. And also that it's not just capital investment. What about the human resource that delivers it? The activation programs that increase participation and expand out into those more diverse and inclusive areas. Recognising the level of investment is continuing and in fact is growing over time. And we need some evidence base. We need to be able to measure the return in terms of the economic and well-being value as well. The ownership and leadership of outdoor recreation in Ireland was a key piece that came back from consultation, and we've addressed that very much in the strategy around the leadership role and co-leadership role that we've defined. Governance and clarity of roles and structures at national and county level, including the role of Corlin and Tuha as well. The strategy is very much, as well as being a national strategy, a national-led strategy, it's got now a very thorough local and community base built into it as well. In the proposal to develop a county-based outdoor recreation committees, which feed in the bottom-up approach to outdoor recreation. Collaboration across the government departments and reducing silo working. The interdepartmental group, the establishment of the interdepartmental group has been vital in this regard. We start to break down those old traditional silo walls and start to work across the departments. Clear guidance on the approach for stakeholders, for community groups, local authorities who want to be involved and are very much delivery agents locally. How do they coordinate their activities? Around infrastructure, planning and carrying capacity of sites, the right trail in the right place, an old adage, but the capacity then to access sites. This is a key one as we see the huge increase in access to the outdoors. What are the capacities for people to be able to access traditional outdoor recreation sites? Visitor management, the pressure of increased visitor numbers on those particular sites, and the geographic spread of developments. Where are they primarily located? One of the key things that we've seen in post-COVID restrictions has been the necessity for access to outdoor recreation opportunities off the doorstep. I was particularly interested in Maya's comment earlier where she referred to, I think it was a direction in the north around all households to have access to greater than 2 hectares of green space within 400 metres of their home. What a really concise and clear way to address that issue, that access from the outdoors. It can't be any longer about the public, about families getting in cars, driving distances to outdoor recreation sites. There has to be that opportunity off the doorstep. In environment education, protecting the natural environment and sustainable development, very, very much key. What about the communication and information on where to go? A general lack of where is that information held? And very importantly, the next two around responsible recreational use and recreational behaviours, absolutely key. Sharing best practice then amongst the key stakeholders as well, and a common approach to outdoor recreation. We need to maintain the momentum post-COVID. As well, and not to let the opportunity of significantly increased interest in the outdoors drop. And how do we get into the harder to reach target groups? A key part of what we're developing at the moment around the increased inclusivity and diversity of the groups that we reach, the target groups we reach. And around access and indemnity, of course, as well, a clear approach to access in Ireland, looking to, if you like, develop a matrix of opportunity for access to different lands. And solution focused, respecting the custodians of the lands, the landowners, and also those who want to enjoy the outdoors. So there are some of the key themes that came through consultation. So I'll take you just quickly through then how all of that has been used to develop, if you like, the draft strategic objectives that will be going out for a consultation soon. So what we developed then were 6 key strategic objectives. I'll just use the highlighted one as an example of how all of that is developed into a lot of detail with an action plan behind it. So around leadership, environment, awareness, opportunities, expertise, and access. I've touched on a number of these already. Key one that we split out just recently were awareness, opportunities, and expertise. Awareness being that more public focused piece around responsible access and use of the outdoors, and expertise being the more internally focused one, internally stakeholder focused one around those who are the providers of infrastructure, of services, of facilities, improving their knowledge and expertise. And then the opportunities piece as well, importantly, increasing and supporting the number of people active in the outdoors, especially from underrepresented groups and young people. So I'll just, taking the opportunities one, just give you an example of how we've developed that now in a draft format in the draft strategy. So each objective then of the 6 objectives you've seen has a set of actions and has a set of actions, and under opportunities we've grouped those into 4 areas. Each of the objectives has this opening statement: in 5 years' time we will see. So you should be able to read the new strategy and see where we will end up in 5 years from now. So we will see an increase in underrepresented groups taking part, a greater focus on learning and playing in the outdoors during early years. Every child in primary and secondary education has multiple opportunities to participate, and an updated curriculum and courses in further and higher education. We need to upskill those who are involved in the provision of and delivery of information and knowledge and expertise on outdoor recreation. So taking that curriculum piece further, this then is what you will see behind it, which is an action plan table. This won't be part of the strategy. The strategy will finish at calling out what the key objectives are. But very importantly, this is how we monitor, measure, and review our progress. So if we have said in 5 years' time we will see an updated curriculum and courses in further and higher education, you can see here there are 3 actions which are numbered, very clearly called out with a timescale, a lead delivery government department or organisation, and a delivery partner against each of those. So it gets into quite a lot of detail behind it. And this is how Department of Rural and Community Development will measure quarterly the performance against each of the actions, and how then Corla Natuha will have oversight of how the delivery of the strategy is proceeding. So that's it really in summary. We are moving quickly now towards a target date of getting it to Cabinet for sign-off here in July, with a view to ministerial launch by Minister Heather Humphreys in August of this year. So thank you very much for your attention. I hope that's been useful, and I hope we get the opportunity to discuss further. Thank you all very much.
Dougie, thank you very much for your presentation. Very envious of where you are in the south of Ireland. I can honestly say that, but I really do hope, I think it was Aidan who mentioned earlier, there is, we hope to do a review of our Northern Ireland countryside or outdoor recreation action plan. We would love to see a new recreation plan for Northern Ireland, and I think just there's so much we can learn from the process that you have gone through. But the thing that stands out the most for me is just the buy-in and the commitment from all your government departments, because I think in the north, where we have suffered for years, really, we have a couple of key departments bought in and a couple of individuals within those departments that are championing outdoor recreation, but it's been very hard to get all departments to buy into outdoor recreation. And whether that is even at a district council level in Northern Ireland, it's the same within district councils. It's trying to help district council, different directorates within those councils appreciate that all directorates have a role to play in outdoor recreation. So there's so much to learn in Northern Ireland from what you've been doing with the National Outdoor Recreation Strategy. So thank you so much for that contribution today. And I know that if people have questions that they want to ask you, they can ask you in the chat, or when we go into our discussion panel, our next session, they can raise their hand and ask you those questions, Docky. So thank you so much for that. And today is all really about learning from each other and learning about what's happening in other places. So we're going to move into a discussion time chaired by Chris, and we have invited Docky to stay on, and then also Pippa Langford. Pippa is from Natural England, and Kevin Lafferty is from Pass for All in Scotland. So I'm just going to pass straight over to Chris, who's going to chair, and again I think we have Docky coming in as well in this. Hand over to Chris just to chair a panel discussion, just to get a view from what's happening in other countries and what the new priorities are across the water and in the south of Ireland. Thanks, Chris.
Thanks, Carolyn. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Chris Scott, Head of Operations with Outdoor Recreation Northern Ireland. So I have been volunteered to chair this session. So looking forward to it. I think in outdoor recreation, we always take great pride in our efforts to look outside Northern Ireland, look at our neighbours in the south with Daithí and Co, but also with our involvement in networks such as the Outdoor Recreation Network and the Visitor Safety Group as well across UK and Ireland. So those are always very valuable platforms for us to engage with. And indeed, the people we have on the panel today are all connections that we have made over the years through those various organisations. So it's great to have them. One of the advantages, I suppose, of virtual events is it means we can get the right people here much easier. So it's fantastic to have Kevin, Pippa and Daithí with us today. So listen, this is just to really give you as participants, as delegates, a break from PowerPoint, and we'll try and keep this nice and informal. I have some questions that I'm going to ask the panel, but I'm really keen for those from the floor to ask questions as well. So listen, you can ask those via the chat pane, as you have been during the morning, or you can put up your virtual hand, or if that doesn't work, turn on your camera and just wave your physical hand at me, and we'll try and get through as many questions as we can in the time we have allowed. As I said, the guys are representing obviously their own organisations, but they're sort of speaking on behalf of their country, so to speak, as well. As obviously, as you can tell there from Daithí, has a really good understanding of everything that's going on in the south of Ireland, Kevin, Scotland, and Pippa indeed in England, and collectively beyond as well. So first of all, it's probably useful, Daithí, we've probably got a good understanding of who you are and what your role is after that last presentation, but conscious we give Kevin and Pippa just a wee opportunity to tell us a little bit about themselves, their job, their role, and how that connects with outdoor recreation. So we're going to go ladies first, and we'll start with Pippa.
Thank you very much, Chris. Yeah, I'm Pippa Langford. I'm Principal Specialist of Recreation and Access at Natural England. Natural England are sort of what's called an arm's length body, which provides advice to DEFRA, which is our Department for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs, but we can also give advice to other departments, so departments like Department for Education, Department of Health, Department of Local Government, Levelling Up it's called now. They keep changing the names. It's a task to keep track of who does what. as I say, I'm principal specialist, which means I'm very much focused on looking at the evidence base behind outdoor recreation around access. I spend a lot of my time trying to improve that evidence base, but also then providing evidence and advice to DEFRA, but also to other bodies who ask us, and to working closely with user groups, in particular stakeholders, because they often come forward with requests about what they want and what they think is lacking. So I'll hand over to Kevin, I think.
Yeah, please do. Kevin, you can go ahead there, please.
Good morning, everybody, and lovely to see you. I'm Kevin Lafferty, the Chief Executive Officer of Pass for All, and Pass for All is Scotland's national walking charity. And really our focus is to create a walking nation and really encourage everyone to walk every day, everywhere, and everyone. But prior to this, I was part of Forestry Commission Scotland for over 15 years and leading on recreation and access. And I suppose also a couple of things just briefly to say that Scotland has some of the world leading access legislation. So I was part of the National Access Forum in Scotland, and we had a key focus on national trails and walking networks. So got that overview, and we've been doing a lot of work here on the strategic framework around visitor management services. So really great to see Docky telling us about the progress in the south and how that really came on big steps. And hopefully we can contribute to the conversation today, and looking forward to listening and also chipping in from the respective countries.
Great, Kevin, Pippa, thank you very much. So listen, we're going to start into just some of the questions just to get some chat going. I'll ask the same questions to you all, and we can just chip in and chat across. Of course, folks, again, I'd encourage you from the floor to get your questions in, either in the pane. Raise your hand or wave at me. Be keen to get questions, so it's not just a conversation between me and the guys. We get other people involved as well. So the first area, obviously, we've had a number of presentations this morning. Duncan and Aideen led on the ORNI research, and indeed, you know, Dahi, you referred to that sort of research and future foresight even within your preparation of the outdoor recreation strategy. So if we look at research. And so, really, what role does that research play in your decision making within either your organisation or within how you focus on your decision making on a national basis? So, Pippa, I'll maybe come to you first on that one, if that's okay.
Yes, it's an interesting challenge because, as you'll know, Chris, but perhaps other people don't. In England, we've had a survey for a long time called the Monitor for Engagement in the Natural Environment, or MENE, as some people call it, which has recently been updated to be called the People and Nature Survey, which came in shortly before COVID. So we've been tracking the same sorts of things as the ORNI survey for quite a long time, well over 10 years. But what I've found is that data doesn't quite get down into the local because it's a national survey, and what we've been looking at recently is understanding more local data. So we've been looking at using things called Strava Metro. You may have come across Strava.
Yeah.
They've got publicly accessible data set called Strava Metro. We've been looking at calibrating that so that we can understand the relationship between Strava data and real numbers. And we've also been thinking about user needs, so particularly those users who don't go out very much. So, and we've been doing that in a couple of ways. One, we've been exploring the use of citizen science, so users can record things and say what they want and what they like and what they don't like. But we've also been doing a particular project around teenage girls, because we know they're a group who particularly don't go out and enjoy the natural environment very much, and we're trying to find out why not. And what we can do to make it better for them. So all about trying to make a better case so that we can drive better investment into outdoor recreation, because like you, we've got some data, and 70% of the public use the countryside, 50% of the public use urban parks. So we've got huge numbers, but very not particularly well informed investment, and not very much of it. And we'd like to see more.
Okay, great. No, it's really, really interesting, the difference in approaches and getting down to that local level. And indeed, actually, I think I remember in one of, it was one of the ORN webinars a few months ago, we had a presentation from Strava, and Strava Metro. When I say Strava actually opened their Dublin office yesterday. They're all back in their office yesterday. So we have a good Strava presence now on the island of Ireland as well, which is useful for us all too. So we'll maybe actually putting the pressure on the ORNI team here, but we'll maybe share some in the outputs of this, some links of how local authorities and so on can access that Strava Metro data as well, because it is very useful. We've used it for some projects internally. So great insight there. But Kevin, we'll come to you in terms of research in Scotland. I've been a market leader in that area over the years, so it'd be good to give us an overview of that.
Yeah, happy to contribute, and similar to Pippa, been involved in some of the national recreation and the Scotland's People and Nature survey for a long time. And I think some of the big kind of picture takeaways is that we're seeing a significant shift to shorter, closer to home visits. So again, this is less about the traditional, going out and travelling large distances to get to national nature reserves or national parks. People want to have access from their doorstep, and it's about the green space that they can walk or cycle to, and that's about distance. So we know that people are really looking for paths or trails within about 400 or 500 metres of the door. So in order to provide that service, we have to recognise that that's the increasing demand. That's what people want, and that's the type of provision they want. So this also means about how we improve the infrastructure and the offer. So bringing green space closer to people, trying to make sure that we create connections and pedestrian connections on foot or by bike or by pedal. But the other big observation over the last 2 years with the pandemic has been that some sectors of society have done really well and been very active. There's also a large percentage of the population who's become deconditioned and become very inactive, and there's been winners and there's been losers. And I think more than ever now, this is about the importance of creating inclusive and accessible outdoor recreation for more people. So I think that's one of the challenges for the sector, is how do we encourage the people who are the least active to become more active? And that's about taking those small steps. So it's about the older adults, people living with long-term conditions, disabilities. And also, just as a quick reflection, in Scotland, one of the things that we did is we did a national audit of all of our trails and paths. And we found that the majority of the provision was for really quite challenging routes, and there was a low level of provision for easy access or all abilities. And for future investment across the sector, what we've got to have is we've got to have more paths and more trails which are fit for our grannies, which are more accessible for more people with buggies or prams or with walking aids. And really that being part of the plan and part of the recreation provision, that it's inclusive and it's more accessible.
Okay, great, Kevin. Yeah, I mean that doorstep recreation is really was always increasing, but as you say, it's really come to the fore over the last two years. Have you? In what way did you do your national audit, Kevin? Was that a map-based process, or how did you pull together that assessment?
Yeah, so we have a national path grading system that we developed over a number of years in Scotland, and obviously we can share that. But it looks at a standardised approach, and it measures gradient, crossfall and barriers. And actually one of the big investments just now is about stripping away physical barriers and removing gates and stiles and actually creating wide openings, so that people can move through on bike, on foot, by buggy. But in terms of completing that, there was an audit, and there was actually some physical audits done on site. So in terms of the National Forest Estate, that was done by 2 dedicated officers, Chris, one in the north, one in the south, and they actually surveyed over 500 kilometres of trail to start off with. And then there's a number of other organisations who've done similar exercises in the national parks. So it's not captured every trail or every path, but it's certainly got the core of the network, and that's been audited.
Okay, excellent. Okay, thank you, Kevin. Yeah, not a small task that in Scotland, I'm sure. So no, very impressive work. Very impressive work. Okay, Dahi, we'll maybe frame it a bit better or a bit differently from you, I suppose. And I appreciate you're currently developing your strategy and you're getting there. What part will research fit into the strategy moving forward? Do you think what's that looking like at this initial stage?
Well, I suppose the example that I had, I was rather picking up on Kevin's theme around the massive increase in terms of access to the outdoors and demand for outdoor recreation now post-COVID has given us some really interesting insights. And there's a very valuable piece of work being developed by Sport Ireland and co-funded by Department of Health, which is the development of the National Digital Database for outdoor recreation. And while that was a piece of work that stands alone from the National Outdoor Recreation Strategy, it now has the opportunity to become very much part of the national strategy. So, and again, just to go back to that, as we mapped our emergence from restrictions where, the stay-at-home guidance moved to move within 5 kilometres from home, well, this was the first time that we really saw, a very considerable number of people looking to stay within their 5 kilometre radius and get access to outdoor recreation opportunities within that 5 kilometre radius. So the National Digital Database, while we have significant information in terms of the national waymarked ways, mountain bike trail centres, etc., the really key part in developing the national strategy is that we will be developing local county outdoor recreation committees. And this is where the real local analysis and assessment and identification of local opportunities sits. And to feed all that then into the National Digital Database will give us for the first time some really concrete data about where to go, what activities to participate in, what to do, and all of the key metrics that are associated with access to the outdoors. That in turn allows us then to be able to put together a communications and promotion package, if you like, to the public in terms of identifying all of that key piece of information. Because that very interestingly, Kevin, as you have said, it's not just about high up challenging trails. It's about simple access to as many as possible, as easily as possible off the doorstep. So I think that's going to be a key part for us as we go through the strategy period over the next 5 years.
Okay, yeah, great. Thanks, Dahi. I know our colleagues, my colleagues in Outdoor Recreation Northern Ireland have been engaging with Sport Ireland quite a bit on that project as well. And indeed, the next presentation today will be on the development of the green space map for Northern Ireland as well. So again, great. A bit like the overview of your strategy, it was commented on in the chat pane. The overlap in themes, north and south, is unsurprisingly remarkable. So again, interesting to see the overlap there and approaches to national databases, green space mapping, and so on. So it's great to have that shared learning between us all there. So yeah, good, thanks for that overview. So I've been a victim of my own success here. We've got plenty of questions coming in on the chat pane. We've got about 7 or 8 more minutes, so we'll keep our answers succinct, and we'll try and get through as many of these as we can. So the next one, which has got quite a bit of support from others, is from Sophie Gordon, who's from Cycling UK, another good friend of Outdoor Recreation Northern Ireland and indeed ORN. So question from Sophie is, how can we provide better information to people about the barriers and access difficulties that do exist, so they can make decisions based on their own physical abilities? So maybe you've done that already, or maybe it's a work in progress. So we'll maybe come to Kevin first on that one, and then Pippa.
Yeah, quite a good question, and there's actually a lot of work happening at the moment to refresh the BT Countryside for All standard. So this is UK guidance, and Paths for All are leading this on behalf of the respective countries and supported by the Outdoor Recreation Network. So that guidance will be published in the summer, and that's basically for the sector. and that provides that technical guidance and also that specification. So watch this space. We'll be able to disseminate and share that with you very soon. But really, that's about the core access for all guidance. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Kevin. Yeah, and I know that Northern Ireland are involved in that as well. ORNI are sitting on the steering group, and indeed I think Sport Northern Ireland provided some funding towards that as well. So it's great to have that connection. Pippa, any work from Natural England or beyond on this this question?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a project that we've just been doing with somebody from Oxford University, Oxfordshire County Council, Ramblers have been involved, and others, looking at developing an app which would collect all that data, because we're just conscious we have something like 118,000 miles of public rights of way and lots of other paths as well. So how do you get that data? Well, local authorities are sitting on a lot of it, and we'd like to lever that out of them. But we're also conscious that we have millions of people going out there every day enjoying themselves, so why not involve them in collecting the data, particularly if we can get them to do it in an automated way. So we've been just doing a little proof of concept project to see if we can use AI to record quite a lot of that, because what we want to do is take the subjective nature out of a path survey, because we know that what's good for one person is bad for somebody else. So what we're trying to do is work up a survey methodology that would mean that everything is recorded which is sort of agnostic about what people might think is good or bad, so that then there is a massive data set, absolutely will be absolutely huge if this flies, which anybody can then mine to then decide whether a path is good enough for a certain quality of a certain type of user. So that you might be going, right, I'm a horse rider, or the BHS, we haven't talked to the BHS yet, but I know they're on this call. We'll go talk to them soon. You know, you can then decide whether these bridleways, they may be bridleways, but are they any good? Will they work for you? And using that data, you'll then be able to decide whether or not the network's any good. Equally for disabled people, there's people with a whole range of different physical abilities, people who can't climb over a stile, people who can climb over a stile but can't walk on paths which are on a slope. There's so many different limiting abilities that we want to be able to collect that data, but then let other people use it in ways that suit them. So that's what we're just investigating now. So watch this space.
Yeah, it sounds fascinating, Pippa. Innovative stuff as always. You know, user generated content or user generated reviews are obviously used. You know, everywhere. You don't ask the tourist board now what the hotel's like. You ask TripAdvisor. You know, so that user generated content will be fascinating. You know, so and indeed. I remember actually just when you mentioned the abilities piece there, and paraphrasing slightly or potentially paraphrasing a lot, when we did the ORN conference last year on Outdoors for All, and you know, a lot of the groups from the disability perspective were saying, you know, listen, thank you for the all ability trails. We really welcome them. They're fantastic. But actually what we really need is just good information to allow us make the choice of where we think we can go. And I thought that was a very different perspective I took from that conference than when I went into it. You know, so it's that user generated content will be really powerful for that.
We may okay. One step further, Chris, and actually make it an open source thing so that it can be developed by a community of users and the app can be developed and supported. So not us controlling what the app does, but other people contributing and improving it, because we're just aware that phones getting more sophisticated. Soon there'll be some already do a LiDAR type sensor. Will we be able to use that to measure path surface quality? We're already using artificial intelligence to identify the difference between a gate and a stile and getting it to read signposts for us. But there are so many more ways we could do this, and I'm conscious that there are some brilliant people out there, and I'm hoping they're going to get interested. So trying to set this free and make it much more a community thing.
Dahi, follow that one. In terms of a providing information about barriers of access and so on. I'm assuming that's come up in your strategy preparation, and maybe work that Cara or so on maybe have done and integrated into the process, for example.
Yes, exactly. And in the subgroups that I mentioned in terms of examining the various themes, that new Cara guidance on access has helped considerably as well. Previously, the work that Kevin has referred to in terms of access for all, you know, hugely valuable in terms of considering how we develop access, but how, very importantly, how we then don't, you know, put barriers to access in place as well. If I could, I think Sophie's question around the information that we need to provide, this is key as well. And again, if we're wearing my Quilsha hat, we found that in developing the new national mountain bike trail centres that we're currently, you know, in the middle of at the moment, it's been hugely important from our point of view that we get accurate information to riders, to the end users, about the nature of the undertaking. So what we're doing is we're describing the nature of what you're going to see if you go onto any particular trail. And at least in that way, then you're giving sufficient information to allow the rider make an informed decision based on their ability. It's not any longer about for expert users only, for new users only, you know, that type of description. It's actually describing the nature of the undertaking, and that's absolutely key. So I think that's one element of it as well. And again, to come back to, you know, growing out beyond that, we need to get away from, sorry, not we need to get away from, but as well as the nice promotional pieces that we use to describe the locations and countryside where we locate our trails, it's to give that very detailed piece as well, so people can really understand what it's about. Just as an aside, there is a drive from Department of Transport as well around universal access, designing for universal access. That has difficulties as well, because as any of us who are trail providers or infrastructure providers know, we need to be able to control those that we don't want to access onto certain areas, you know, from a damage limitation point of view or user conflict point of view. So a challenge.
Okay, indeed. No, but plenty of good work going on there, indeed, Dahi, as well. So I can sense Carolyn shaking her fist at me in the background here, but she can't get at me, so that's okay. I'm going to ask one more question before we move on, because it's actually from one of my colleagues. So we heard a lot from Dahi there, Kevin, about the collaboration and the joint up approach in the Republic of Ireland with regards to the strategy there. Hugely impressive. Just conscious from a Scotland perspective, so who leads on shaping the strategy for outdoor recreation for Scotland, or how does that process work?
Yeah, I mean, the main thing to say here, Chris, was that we had really strong political leadership here. So we had our CAB Sec at the time, Fergus Ewing, who basically set the challenge out to all of the land managers and all of the public bodies to come together and to have a conversation and come up with a strategic framework or a strategy for Scotland for a 2030 vision. So I think it's important to say that it was initiated by that political leadership, and you really need that at quite a senior level. And what that did is it brought all of the land managers and the public bodies around the table to create that collective sort of framework and strategy. So, and put simply, that's how we came together and collaborated with that driver.
Great, Kevin. Thank you very much. And Pippa, how do things? You're a slightly bigger operation there, but how do things work in England then? Have put you on the spot?
You have, rather.
You can pass on that one if you wish. Yeah.
I can just say, I was really interested by Das's presentation, and I thought that would be really helpful if we could do something similar here.
Spoken like a true diplomat, Pippa. Thank you very much. Yeah, that's great. Well, listen, we went a few minutes over time there, folks. Dahi, Kevin, and Pippa, thank you very much. I think you're staying with us for the rest of the session. So there's a few questions in the chat pane we didn't get to, and I'm sure there'll be a few others will come in across the session. So, Carolyn, apologies, I'm over time, but I think that was worthwhile holding on for. So I'll pass back to you.
Thanks, Chris. No apology needed. I was just thinking to myself, it's a shame, really, we've had to cut you off because there's just so much information in that one discussion. And I'm sure Kerry and Elizabeth might kill me for saying this, but maybe there'd be an opportunity to take up some of that discussion and take it further as individual training or seminar themes. I mean, there's just so much within those 20 minutes. But we are running out of time, so we have to move on. But thanks, Chris, and again, thanks to Docky and to Pippa and to Kevin for sharing that. So our last session before lunch is a really exciting project that we're involved in, and it's all about green space mapping, and it comes back to that whole idea of being able to provide the evidence base for doorstep opportunities, to be able to say how far away people live from well, I suppose both green and blue space. So I'm going to hand over to Emma, Elizabeth and John, who are going to give a presentation on this project.
Thank you, Carolyn. So just before lunch, we want to give you a quick flyover of the green space map that we are developing for Northern Ireland. And this is very exciting. The project team that's leading this, of course, in collaboration with statutory organisations, with councils, with NGOs, is myself. So I'm a project officer for outdoor recreation in Northern Ireland. Emma Taylor, who is a GIS technician for outdoor recreation in Northern Ireland, and John Hewitt, who is a GIS consultant for geopolitical. So why is having a green space map important? Well, we've probably already looked at that. John, if you could fly on to the next screen, please. So as Aideen and Duncan were sharing earlier, the PubNI data shows us that people's access to green space really matters. If you live closer to green space, you're more likely to visit the outdoors more, and therefore you have access to all the benefits that come from that. So improved health and well-being, connection to nature, etc. Hopefully, if you remember back to the stats that Aideen called out earlier, the national average for getting outdoors at least once a week across Northern Ireland is 71%. And what you can see in that chart in front of you is that this increases to 80% for those who live within a 5-minute walk of green-blue space. And then you have this steady decline, so you can see that it slopes down and you have a massive drop-off once you get beyond 20 minutes to green space. So it drops down to 62% and then tails off again. So addressing this disparity is really important moving forward. And as Maya said earlier, this is also recognised within the new environment strategy. And we really welcome the target that has been set in that by 2050, 90% of households should be within 400 metres of quality natural green-blue space. So to achieve this, there's going to be lots of work to do in the next 3 decades, and we're going to have to work together in a strategic and a coordinated way. And I think that's where the usefulness of this green space map is really going to come into play. Next slide, please, John. So this green space map, it has been funded by DAERA on behalf of the Cross-Departmental Strategic Outdoor Recreation Group. And we have been commissioned, and we're partnering with geopolitical to create this authoritative map of all trails and green space across Northern Ireland. We have 3 very clear aims. So first of all, we want to have an objective measure to measure progress towards this target of having 90% of the population within 400 metres of quality natural space. PubNI provides us with a perceptive measure, but this map will give us an objective measure. And number 2, it will become a really important planning and decision-making tool to inform green infrastructure going forward. So where our trails, where our green space should be. And it should really help us to work together. So all organisations, statutory, non-statutory, councils, NGOs working together to make the biggest impact in the areas where there is the greatest need. And we're not going to hide this map. It's not going to be something that's going to be tucked away in some GIS database. It's going to be easily available. It's going to be on Special NI, where stakeholders can go onto it and download it, take it through to your own services, use it for lots of analysis and planning purposes. It's also going to be an outdoor NI, where the consumers will be able to engage with high quality, high detailed information on all trails and green spaces. It'll also be available in open data NI, where people can use the raw data and do new and exciting things with it. And then my final slide, John, please. So it's going to be the first fully comprehensive and high detailed map of all natural places where people can take part in outdoor recreation. And so we've been thinking, well, what do we want to include in that? So there's all sorts of trails that have access permitted. It's going to include public rights of way and all our greenways and towpaths. In terms of green space, we're going to include all sorts of different parks. So kind of right up there from those big country parks and public parks and gardens and private estates and gardens with permitted access, right down to those kind of more local doorstep opportunities. So the public playing fields and our play parks that have green space. We'll include all the forests and woodland that has permitted access, the same for beaches, and all our nature reserves, whether owned by statutory organisations or non-statutory. We're also going to include, and importantly, amenity green space. So that's all those kinds of important open green spaces in urban areas that people use for picnics, having a kickabout, etc. And importantly, we're going to include amenity green space such as allotments, community growing spaces, city gardens and zoos. So these are other ways that people engage with the outdoors. And then we're also going to include the open country that has permitted access across Northern Ireland and heritage sites that has permitted access as well. So that's the kind of introduction. I'm now going to hand you over to the actual brains of the project. So that's Emma and John, and they're going to explain how we're actually doing this, how we're making the map and some of the applications that we will have from it.
Thank you, Elizabeth. As Elizabeth said, I'm the GIS technician working on the project. So I'm just going to give you a quick overview into what I've been doing so far. So what I've been working on is updating and refining the existing data for the green space map. So firstly, this meant getting the most up-to-date data from the organisations with the details of new sites, new boundaries, etc., stuff like that. So big thank you to anybody who has provided data so far and anybody who will in the future. The next part was then refining the existing data. So this slide shows just two examples of what I've been doing. A lot of the data only really existed in point form, and for the green space map we need it in polygon form, so I had to create this data. So the first example is how I created the council green space layer. So using existing data for points for parks and playing fields, I combined that with ORNI Fusion data for each of the 11 council areas to create polygons of green spaces. The next example then is how I created a beaches layer. Only some point data of public beaches existed. So I've been working to create a comprehensive map of all the publicly accessible beaches in Northern Ireland. I started using the ORNI data for 25 points of the primary beaches in Northern Ireland. From this then we set out a criteria for how we would define a beach. So we defined a beach firstly using ORNI Fusion data, where the type code was sand, sand and shingle, or shingle. We also said that the area had to be greater than 0.5 hectares with clear or potential public access. So using this criteria, I have created a data set of over 120 beach polygons. So the next stage then was the refinement phase. So big thank you to everybody I've been chatting to so far. Your role in this project is key to make it as accurate and as authoritative as possible. So I've been determining access to sites, find the areas that are in the data but aren't necessarily open to the public, and I've been adding that information into the attribute table. So this map shows where we're at so far with the project, but what's next? So the next step that we'll be moving towards in the next couple of weeks is a verification and council engagement. So countryside and access officers here today, that's where you come in. So I'll be getting in contact with you soon. What we aim to do in this stage of the project is find the gaps, so any of the sites we've missed so far. We also want to add in the up-to-date data, accurate data from the councils with public accessible green spaces. And finally, for me, for our analysis, we want to find how many people live within 400 metres of trails and green space So in order to do this, we need to know how people get into green spaces. So we're currently working on adding in access point information. So over to John now for the exciting bit.
Thanks, Emma, and hello everybody. It's lovely to be here. So I'm going to talk to you really about the next step after Emma's great work of taking a lot of different data sets basically and putting them into a common format. I suppose our ultimate output is two entities, two spatial layers, one for green space and one for trails. And what I'm showing you here is some of the automated models we've created to load that data and to do some things with the data for the analysis. So here we're looking at, I thought it was just interesting for you to see these things. This is the sources of council data. So from all of our councils, loading into an automated model, into our green space model. And then, as has been set up to now as well, doing things like removing any green space less than 2 hectares. So we're doing some things with the data as well. As well as that, in our automated model, because we're taking a range of data sets and putting them into one, we add things like the source of the data, the type of the data, and the date of last update of the data as well, as we load them. And this one you're seeing down here is from a lot of our other agencies that are providing us data as well, like the National Trust, RSPB, and I've put all those data providers down here, and a big thank you to them all, because I think quite a few are on this call as well. And if I go to the next slide, what you're looking at here is once we've loaded that data, this is some of the analysis we're doing with it basically. So here we're automatically creating access points to green space, because that's one of our data gaps really, is those access points, and that's what we use to create the service areas that we can then determine the proximity of people's addresses, their houses, to the green space. So here we're using some rules we've developed to do things like, if the Ordnance Survey transport network or the paths intersect with a piece of green space, then we create an access point, really just to give us that first benchmark. So you can see it's a reasonably complex bit of processing up to now, and this is the result. So I'm going to show you a live demo of this as well, but this is the result of those 2 steps basically. So here we're looking at, this is Lisburn Council area, this is our green space layer here, our trails here as well. And what you're looking at here is the service areas around that green space. So from each access point to the green space, where would we get to if we walked for 5 minutes basically? And that's the area you see here in purple. And then over that we've overlaid the actual addresses that lie within those areas. So then we can work out the numbers of people within that 5-minute walking distance. And if I switch over to this view, hopefully your view has changed as well. Are you now seeing an interactive map? Good, good. So here is that same area, and as well as the green space here, I'll just click on some so you can see they're alive. So this is Wallace Park in Lisburn, and you'll see as well some of the things I've been talking about, like we've put on, where it's come from. Emma's been adding statistics or information to it, like is it paid access or public access? And we can build up a picture. So here are the service areas that we're creating. So that's those areas around each of the access points to green space. There's the addresses within those service areas. There's the trails. And we can add in other contextual information as well. A scenario might be using this layer as part of the planning consultation process. So we can add in planning applications from the area. I've added in some other data sets here, like water courses, public rights of way, really to give a holistic view, I suppose, of green space within the environment. And also we can aggregate that data. So at the minute, I have lots of points, you can see it, which are addresses within the green space, but we can also summarize those by, in this case, I've done it by super output area, which is a good statistical geography because it's roughly the same amount of people in each one, as you will all know. So then I'm colouring these. The darker blue ones have better access to green space in those census output areas. So that's sort of the visualization and potential around overlaying not just the green space but other layers within the context. What I put together as well is maybe to show some of the analysis opportunities. So here is a dashboard that shows that same area starting out, but here we're doing some analysis really on the fly to this data. So the map you see here, these are the sources of the data within that map, the sources of green space and the types of trail within the map. I've also at the bottom got a breakdown of within each council area, the number of addresses within that 400-metre limit, that 5-minute walking distance of green space, and some summary stats here. So the numbers of kilometres of trails on the map and of green space. So if I zoom out, you can see all these guys increasing and changing to reflect what's on the map extent. I can also do things like, well, just show me all the Forest Service data. As I say, this one is the source of the green space data. So even looking at this pie chart, you can see, you know, the range of agencies that that we're combining data from. So there's all the Forest Service data, there's NIEA, maybe some of our council data. There we go. So lots and lots of agencies contributing. And then the trail types. So I can say, well, just show me all the greenways, which would be primarily urban, maybe the public rights of way. So the map's sort of working in sync with these guys as well. And one thing we can do as well with this is we can look at, you know, maybe some comparison and really, distances to green space in relation to other factors. So here, the orange dots on the map are deprivation. So this is the deprivation indicators across census output areas. Basically, the bigger circle, the more deprived area it is. And the blue you'll see behind is the access to green space. So darker blue has better access. So I can do things like show me just the, say, the bottom 25%. So those orange dots now reflect the 25 most deprived areas. And here I can say, well, just show me the ones with less access to green space. So I can do, you know, a compare and contrast. And I could do this really with any of the statistics that are available for the areas. One other view we took of that is, I mean, this is, I hope, showing the power really of the green space data and the power in having it as a single element, single layer as well. And this is really just looking at it in a different way. So here we use a different technique. Instead of using the addresses, the addresses for Northern Ireland, we use the population on those super output areas. So here I can move it down and say, well, here actually just for show me the people that live within a certain distance so as I move the slider, it's a smaller and smaller distance to green space, and it shows me the amount of population that are within that distance. You'll see these guys getting smaller. These little lines is the distance between a super output area and their nearest piece of green space. So it's just another way to analyze the data. One nice thing as well is the way this data is presented. It tells you the super output area and their nearest green space. So it's quite a useful thing as well. And to finish off, the very final thing, I suppose, on the theme of different ways to visualize the data as well. So here's a 3D element to this. So again, exactly the same data. I suppose one of the messages here is that we can use this in multiple ways for analysis or visualization. So here, we're just looking at the same green space data in a different way. So for each of these guys here, if I click on one, you'll see there is our green space area, and with exactly the same attributes as I showed you before. And we can do a little fly along the lagoon and look at all the different elements of green space. I bet you didn't think today you'd be flying over the lagoon on this at the conference. So there you go, another nice way to visualize the data, and not just a nice way to visualize it, you know, very real scenarios there as well, where you can look at things like the line of sight from a piece of green space, you know, in relation to perhaps a planning application in the area. That's pretty much the live demo done, and I think I have one last slide, which is next steps. And our next steps, a simple 3 I've put up, really to refine the green space data and processes, and we still have a fair amount to do on that, as Emma said, to improve the data, but put more data in there and automate our processes even more. Then to publish that layer to open data, as Elizabeth said, target for that's autumn 2022, and then to make that green space layer also available within ORNI. So I hope that's been useful, and that's our presentation.
Thank you so much to John, Elizabeth and Emma. That is the first time that I have actually seen the beginnings, the outworkings of that project, and I am hugely impressed. I can honestly say I never imagined that that's where we were actually going to get to on that project. And I can see from the comments, lots of other people are thinking the same thing. What a brilliant resource we have for Northern Ireland. It's just fantastic project. So well done to the 3 of you involved in it. And Emma's only a recent recruit to Outdoor Recreation Northern Ireland. So fair play to Emma for getting involved in that project and getting stuck in. And can I just make a plea on behalf of Emma? So the information, obviously, we need to get in from people. So Emma said there, the next layer is the council. So please, if you are from a council and Emma approaches you for the information, now you see where all that information is going and what the final output is. So please do assist us. That would be really appreciated. Okay, so that is the end of our morning session. Can I just say a really big thank you to everyone who has contributed this morning. It's been, I think, an absolutely superb session looking at the strategy level. To Dawson and Maya, to Duncan, Aideen, Docky, Pippa, Kevin, Chris, John, Emma and Elizabeth for all your contributions to this morning. It really has been a super session. So after the break, so we're all back at 1:30, so you can just join in using the same login details as you did this morning, or if you're having issues doing that, just email Kerry at Outdoor Recreation NI. So last year over lunch, we had a wee bit of fun. We set you a challenge. We asked you to go out and have a walk and take a picture and upload it to Twitter or to email it to Kerry again. So upload it to #OutdoorRecPotential. This year we've got a proper prize. We've got you a £25 Cotswold outdoor voucher. So please do join in the fun over lunchtime, and we will come back and start the session after lunch with announcing the winner. And then we will go straight into our final set of presentations. So thank you again to all who have contributed to this morning. Enjoy your lunch until 1:30 and get out there and get a nice photograph and get it uploaded. Thanks very much, and we'll see you all again at 1:30. Thank you.
Thank you, Caroline. Great morning.